Shh, 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 shh.
People did.
Good evening, everybody. Welcome to today's meeting. I'll start with the usual preamble. This is a public meeting and members of the public and press are permitted to report on the proceedings. Reporting includes filming, photographing, making an audio recording and providing commentary on proceedings. Please note this meeting is recorded and streamed live. These recordings are published on the relevant meeting page at the Council's website. By choosing to attend this public meeting, you are deemed to have given your consent to being filmed or recorded and for any footage to be broadcast or published. If the alarm sounds, the premises must be evacuated immediately. Do not spend time collecting personal belongings. All emergency escape routes are clearly signed once you have left the building. The assembly point is in the High Street opposite the Guildhall. And members and other speakers are reminded please to use their microphone when speaking. Thank you. Okay, so first of all, Margaret, do we have any substitutes or apologies, please?
There are no substitutes this evening, Chair, and no apologies received. Thank you.
Thank you. Do I have any declarations of interest, please, from anybody? No. And Margaret, we've got no public participation.
That's correct, Chair. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we'll go through the minutes, but first of all, I'd just like to thank everybody for their contributions this year, because this is the last meeting before we break up for the election, I suppose. I'd like to thank Zoe for being my vice chair. I think we've been a good team. And also in the minutes it mentions that we were putting forward the budget, you know, from this committee, and of course they've all gone through, so that's really excellent. So do we have any comments or any notes or problems with the minutes from last time? I think it's 6 pages. I can go through them one by one. Yeah, page 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. Okay, thank you. Okay, so our first item on the agenda is the proposed performance scorecard. So Shane.
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. Good evening, members. We've reached that time of the year when we look back at the work of the committee over the year and start to think about what the priorities for the committee will be in the coming year and think our way through the various performance measures that we've got on the committee. And we'll do that again, as usual, with a view to getting to a position in June when we've got a new committee meeting and a new set of programme and activity, and then, of course, work out the year's programme on the basis of that. Now, this year's is slightly different because of the invention of something called the Office for Local Government. And if you've not come across this yet, it's shortened to OFLOG for convenience. This has been created by the department with a view to, as it says here in paragraph 2.3, providing authoritative and accessible data and analysis about the performance of local government and support its improvement. Thank you. So replicating some of the work of the Audit Commission, but not in the same way as the Audit Commission was an independent organisation which sometimes challenged government as much as it challenged local authorities. This is very much an organisation created by the department. And it's in parallel with a couple of other things that are happening. One is that the department has reissued its guidance around best value, so it's looking back to see how we can reinvigorate that and engage with this concept of sustainable improvement, which is always supported. And then secondly, for those who have been following events, when we had a little bit of extra funding through the settlement, that came with a caveat that the Secretary of State would like us to produce a productivity plan, which we have to publish by the end of July. These are all part of a kind of a desire on the part of government, as far as I can see, to get some early signals, early ideas about which authorities are performing well, which are potentially going to be ones where the government needs to intervene, and developing an approach whereby they can come and have a conversation with us if the indicators are showing up some measures or some concerns which they want to talk to us about. So this creates a question for me to how best to respond to this. How do we pull our understanding, our information, our knowledge together in such a way that we can be assured that we're not going to get in a position where somebody from OFLOG turns up and taps on our shoulders and says, what's going on here then? We already know that. And that seems to me needs a kind of a corporate response to it. That presents us with a slight problem because we have a committee system and we support this approach and we work with it, and it's worked very well for us over the past 7 years or so. But and I've worked in committee system, authorities with committee systems before, and when you get issues within that system, what that tends to be is where you've got two sets of information or the same information going to two different committees. So you're getting different opinions and a different discussion about that, and sometimes a conflict develops. So it's important to avoid that, and I can see looking ahead that we're in potentially to have that situation here. So if we develop a corporate response, then it's going to have to take into account Oflog's indicators. And for example, one of those key indicators which Oflog is looking into and is already published, which is in Appendix 1, is in the area of waste, household waste recycling rates, residual household waste, and recycling contamination rate. Now, two of those are already published as part of this committee. So if we publish them as part of an Oflog report going to Policy and Resources Committee, then we're potentially duplicating it. So what can we do? Well, we could live with that. We say, well, let's duplicate it. That's happy. We can have that discussion. Or we could say, well, that's a matter for the committee. It remains a priority there, and we should focus on that and not incorporate it into a corporate document or response. Or we could present the corporate response and say, well, let's have the indicator going to that committee. In this case, what's proposed in the report is Policy and Resources Committee. So how do we resolve that? Well, what the report is proposing, and it's simply for consideration. So nothing's agreed, no one's saying this is the right way to go, but what's proposed here for consideration is that we develop an Oflog focus report for Policy and Resources, and that the indicators which are currently at committee level are going to Policy and Resources for consideration. But in the event that there are ones which are relevant to the remit of any particular committee, then that committee would pick that up and continue with its responsibility for ensuring performance is on track and improving where it's necessary. Those are the proposals. They're just set out in terms of saying, well, let's discuss this, let's get some feedback, let's understand your perspectives, and then when we come to a position in June, we can then develop what seems to be the right response and make sure we're in the right place so that we can try and create the balance that we need to create. So that's as far as it goes. Happy, very happy to understand anybody's perspectives, and in particular, I'll be interested to know of those indicators which are presented in Appendix 2, you particularly feel are the ones to be kept at this committee, Appendix 3 rather. The aim, the kind of broader aim is that where Appendix 2 are the priorities, and this time of year we will review those priorities and present a new set of priorities in the June committee, that what really the indicators should do is help us to understand whether or not we're achieving the objectives in terms of those priorities. So for instance, if we've got an air quality action plan development as one of our priorities, then obviously an indicator like carbon emissions would be really important to see if we're making any progress on that. So you can make an argument for saying that's the kind of indicator which we should keep, because it will enable us to see whether we're making progress against what we've agreed as our priorities. Okay, happy to leave it there. If there are any, welcome any views that members may have. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, thank you, Shane. I've got Zoe first, please. Thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much, Shane. And I do think this is a really, first of all, thank you for bringing this to the committee. I think it's really timely that we have a debate about performance reporting. I really welcome that. And for a lot of the reasons that we need to look are outlined in section 2 of the report. However, what I think is we need to be looking at is performance reporting. And the thing that concerns me about this report is the idea of corporate performance reporting, because I think there is a very important distinction. And because of that distinction, I am personally very opposed to the preferred option in this paper. And that's largely due to the fact that it's this focus on corporate. As you've already mentioned, this council operates a committee system, and I think I see nothing around the room from anybody saying they want to move away from that. And I think this preferred approach is really much more suited to a cabinet approach. If we're going to keep a committee system, I strongly believe that the relevant committee needs to retain oversight of all aspects of their policy area, and to really make sure that we as Environment Committee all understand what's happening, not just in the project, but in the core work that the team do. I absolutely think that the democratic oversight of core environmental services is essential, and this policy and proposal is removing that. It's relegating us to only looking at project work, and I really don't think that's what we should be accepting as democratically elected members. It means that committee members on this room will no longer have the information about how the council is performing in core services. And I think with environment, that's really, really important. We won't know whether the bins are being emptied regularly. We won't know whether the level of the street cleaning is acceptable. We won't know where problem areas exist. Unless we check for ourselves and walk around the city, we won't know whether the grass is being cut. We won't know whether fly tipping is being removed in a timely way. I could go on with lots of examples. I can't speak for others, but I found that information really useful. I know it comes here and sometimes we just glance over it, it doesn't get discussed, but the explanations that are put there have been really helpful to be able to say to residents. There was an issue that we had with grass cutting due to staff issues last year. We got residents complaining about it. We were able to say, this is what's happening and it's being addressed. That sort of information is really, really important. And I'm not advocating we should have a performance dashboard. Potentially the one that we've got isn't fit for purpose, but I don't think we should be creating work for Sandra and her team. I'm confident that Sandra and her team have data that they use to be able to be as effective as they are. What we want to do is make sure that gets shared with elected members. I also want to be very clear, I'm not suggesting that we take this as a way of scrutinising and challenging the performance. We've got a very good cooperative way of working in this council, both across political parties and with our officers, and our access to that information enables us to support officers. For example, I gave about the grass cutting, but also it means that we know what's going on. We can talk, we can defend our officers. When they come to us and say, actually there's an issue of capacity in this particular area, we're going to have more investment. At the moment, it's really hard because we don't have enough money as a council. If we understand those issues, we can be much more supportive. So I really want to say that when I'm saying that we should keep this, it's not about creating extra work. It's about us being very sighted on the issues as they emerged, understanding what's happening in their council. The other problem I have with this idea of centralising it is actually we're only looking at the offlog at the moment, indicators going to policy and resources. Now, I know that those are all up in arms and they might change and they might expand. But at the moment, those core council services and policy environment won't be looked at by any elected member. So we'll be, not that I don't trust Sandra and her team because I think they do an outstandingly good job, but there will be no elected members who will know what's going on in that area. And I just think the whole point of local democracy is undermined if we don't have that. It might be that more does go to policy and resources, and then it begs the question, are they going to have the capacity with everything else that they're doing to be looking at and scrutinising them? I strongly believe it should sit here and we should be escalating things to policy and resources and not the other way around. So therefore, I would really urge members to reject this preferred option. Unfortunately, it only gives us a choice between the preferred option and the status quo, and actually, I don't think either are fit for purpose. What we want is that middle way, yes, Shane, I agree, we really do need to review the performance indicators, and I think with the new council as we go forward, it's timely to throw them all up in the air and say, what are the things that we really want to know? What do we want to do going forward? Let's not just tinker around the edges and look what we've got now. Let's make sure we've got a robust, sensible set of environmental indicators that this committee can work at going forward. That will give us a meaningful insight into service delivery, allow us to support officers, and the other things that they mentioned in the report are things like benchmarking. We can make sure that that set of indicators allows for that benchmarking and allows for those concerns that are highlighted in the report about making sure that there is that policy oversight of offlog. So that's my view, and I would just really urge members to reject the preferred option and come up with a third way.
Thank you, Zoe. That's very useful. Councillor Cooper?
Thank you, Chair. Zoe said what I was going to say in a much more detailed style, but I mean, I too had real problems in Arboretum with residents saying the grass hasn't been cut, and then it was the weeds because of all the rain. But because we had that storytelling, and so often councillors are the face of the City Council, not the officers. And so we're the ones that are communicating that message. So we do need the detail to be able to do that for residents. So I agree with you, Zoe. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Do I have any? Oh yeah, Councillor Cleary.
Question really is by nowhere means as important as the things I've just heard from the other two councillors, but it's something I saw on page 11 where it says the percentage of major planning applications decided in time, and the statutory period is 13 weeks unless it's 16 for something that needs an environmental impact. But then for non-major applications, it's 8 weeks, but it's still the 16-week environmental assessment. So is that because the environmental assessment takes longer for non-major ones, or is it because it just takes 16 weeks for an environmental assessment, irrespective of whether it's major or minor? Does that make sense?
Yeah, Councillor Cleary, I think that's a planning KPI, but you are correct. It's because an environment impact assessment takes that long. Okay, that's all right, thank you. I'd like to echo what Zoe said. I think I really like what you've said, Shane, in 2.2, where you said that we reflect what matters most under the functions of the committee. And I think what matters most to the residents, what matters most to us for our objectives as a council, as a city, and what matters most to our residents are missed bin collections, animal fouling, street litter, overflowing bins, fly tipping. What matters to us is meeting a carbon zero for 2030. It's about sorting out the air quality. It's about our tree planting, electrifying our fleet, and all those other projects. So it's those double layer of stuff. And I just think the knowledge that I have gained as chair while I've been here this year, with Zoe, we've gone round and we've seen the recycling sites. We've been to the Envirosort, we've been to the, where was it the other day we were at, Sandra? The landfill. We've been to other things. And we understand the detail of what's going on at the moment with our recycling and our waste, and what actually are some of the barriers to us increasing our recycling rate and reducing our contamination. And that knowledge is something that you build up over time, working with officers at a very detailed level, having lots of conversations. I don't think you can expect everyone on PNR to have that level of detail. And I think it's actually a little bit unfair as well. And for me, if PNR were coming back to me saying your recycling rate isn't good enough, naughty, I don't really like it. I think it's completely the wrong way around. And what I would prefer to be doing is saying to PNR, we need more money, we need more support, which is what we did last year when we said, we need this money for goals, we need this money for this, we need this money for that. And I think that's the right way around. But I'm happy to review the actual performance scorecard itself. I do think that where we do the percentage poor grass maintenance, you know, we want to look at actually cutting our grass less in some places. We want to look at our biodiversity priorities, and those aren't reflected yet, I don't think, in the performance indicators. Zoe.
Yeah, in light of there seems to be a consensus and lots of nods around the room, I would like to propose that we have a formal vote so we can send a very clear message back to Policy and Resources about the view of this committee. I know it's not a requirement, but I do think I'd like to be able to make sure that if this is the collective view of this committee, that it goes very strongly back to PNR, because I am very aware this same report is going to all different committees. The likelihood is that different committees will have different views because, to be perfectly honest, the balance between projects and core performance indicators varies by area. So I think it's absolutely crucial to environment. I understand that last night in PED they had a slightly different view, but then they have a different type of agenda. So I would like to make sure that this will have to go to Policy and Resources, and they're going to have to somehow mediate differences of views of committees about the way that we go forward. So I would like to make sure, if this is a collective view of environment, and please speak if you disagree or vote against it if you don't, I'd like to make sure we send that message loud and strong.
Councillor Jagger.
Thank you, Chair. I am actually very persuaded by your arguments today, and I was in PED yesterday, which we reached different decisions on, puts me in a bit of an awkward position. So I just wonder what, how the different decisions will affect the different committees, and whether there is room for different approaches to be taken by different committees, because I wish I'd heard those arguments yesterday, because actually I find them quite persuasive.
Thank you. Councillor Cross. Oh, sorry. Just let Shane answer your question. Sorry.
Thank you, Chair. Just in terms of that approach, and I think the way the report is worded isn't perhaps quite as precise as it could be. I mean, it was never my intention or my thinking that this is about Policy and Resources being a primary committee. I mean, it's really embedded in the Constitution that it's not. All committees are equal, and we've had a number of examples in the past where we've stuck to that. Really, it was about having a corporate view. Okay, so we're all conscious of the indicators here in Environment Committee, but I wonder if the same questions were arising about, the indicators in Communities Committee or in PED Committee, that we would feel and understand them in the same way. So how do we get this sort of corporate understanding and make sure we're addressing this question from Oflog? So what was more in my mind was that if you've got indicators that are coming through to policy and resources and they're not as good as they should be, then that suggests that something's not functioning right somewhere. And that falls within the remit of each individual committee to actually manage that and work with the lead officers to ensure that things are going the way that they're going. So it's not one way round or another. It's a circular argument. It's going to policy and resources to get that corporate view, but the committees continue to work and take responsibility for and make determinations, which is a phrase in the Constitution, about the matters within their committee. So there's no hard and fast rule, and I entirely accept the idea that some committees would want to have more focus on PIs, others want to have more focus on priority projects and so on. What I'm hoping to achieve is somewhere where we've got both of those, where we've got those kind of priorities and we've got indicators which tell us and inform us about how we're making progress against those priorities, but at the same time manage to capture this sort of corporate overview so that we know collectively, all of us, that we're ahead of the policy and ahead of the Oflog agenda. So that's the kind of where I'm trying to get to. I'm really interested in all these views, and there is no, I'm happy to feed back to policy and resources views as they're presented, and if we want to, do that as an amendment to the report, then that's fine, so that we can make that formal and make sure that happens. So, that's what we're trying to get to. It's not about moving away from the committee system or trying to undermine democracy. What I'm trying to do is to make something which is more effective, more streamlined, more focused on priorities, and gives us sufficient balance between what the individual committees and their priorities and remit and this corporate position which we're being driven to. Let's not make any mistakes. This is not coming from the centre or from the council. This is in response to a drive from the department to get us to focus on specific things, and we need to find a way of doing that. Sorry, that was a rather longer answer than I'd expected. Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Shane. I do think, though, that the Oflog recycling rates that are in here, these are things that we need to see. And I think it's fine having an annual report maybe going to P&R. I mean, this is the in-between approach, which I think you were alluding to, Zoe. An annual report going to P&R, but really the quarterly report coming to us. Councillor Cross and then Councillor Cooper. Thank you. Go on, you go first. Let's go round. Let's just go round like that. Thank you.
I was just going to say, I echo what Councillor Jagger said, because I was at the committee meeting last night, and what Councillor Cookson has said has led me to sort of look at it from a different perspective, and I wish somebody had said that last night. Not that it would have necessarily changed the way that it went, but it's nice to hear a different perspective. So I'm genuinely torn at the moment, because that perspective would have been useful last night, and I'm glad that I heard it. Thank you.
Councillor Cross.
Thank you. Yeah, this does feel like a shoe handed to us from Westminster that really doesn't fit us with our committee system. If it suits a cabinet system but doesn't suit councils with a committee system, I wonder how many other councils with our sort of setup will be struggling with it. And there's a danger of throwing the baby out with the bathwater in the sake of reform. That I suppose one question is, if this is a requirement from central government for us to change how we do things, how we monitor and report, and that this then has administrative burden, is there any funding promise from government to meet this extra cost at a time when budgets are really under pressure? So I completely support what you proposed, Vice Chair, and would be happy to second a show of hands to send a message. Thank you.
Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. I think the difference between PED last night and Environment tonight is that a lot of the PED work is very sort of project-based, whereas there's lots of maintenance things that happen in Environment. And so I think it's a very different way of reporting, because they're quite different committees with quite different priorities. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely key, because really a lot of our performances are very public focused, and the public notice things, you know, and that's why we have to be on the ball. Councillor Bissett?
Thank you, Chair. It's really quite stunning when you compare Appendix 2 proposed 2024-25 committee performance scorecard with the one for this year, and I'd just be really sorry to see us not be regularly monitoring the things that we monitor at the moment. Possibly there's some scope for combining some of them. I see there's a lot about things being done in time, and maybe some of those could be merged if that would help. And the other thing I wanted to say is that the recommendation is actually is really very general compared to all the information we have under preferred option. So I mean, we have considered it, and we've done both 1.1 and 1.2. We just don't happen to be very happy with it. But as long as we have the reassurance that our feelings are going to go to P&R, then perhaps we don't need to amend the recommendation, because we have actually done those two things.
Okay, so we have a proposal that we amend the recommendation. So it would be that the Environment Committee considers the proposed revised approach to corporate performance reporting and advise that the preferred option as set out in the report is not approved. Okay, should we vote on that?
Second.
Yeah, Councillor.
Well, if you're proposing that, I'm happy to second it, but I'd just like to make one other point. If we are going to look at revising the store scorecard going forward, which I really think is important, I think rather than us do it as members and us start deciding, I think we need to be asking Sandra's team to be guiding us on what is information that they use at the moment that would be useful to us, and then we have a discussion based on the point of not creating a lot more work.
Yeah.
So I'm sorry,
totally agree.
to some degree that creates you more work to sort it out, but long term it will save you work, rather than, I think there's a risk if we as elected members sit down and trying to decide how it works ourselves.
Yeah, that's absolutely key, isn't it? Because, you know, we're working as a team. Okay, so if I propose it, you second it. Can I see a show of hands in support, please? Okay, votes against and abstentions. Thank you. Okay, so I don't know, that recommendation can go through, please, like that.
I'll just send it over to Margaret now. She can include it in the minutes. Okay.
Thank you very much. Okay, right. So now we've got item 6, which is the simpler recycling update, food waste collections, and this is Lloyd.
Thank you, Chair. Chair, a longer than usual report, but quite a meaty subject. And the reason for us bringing it to you this evening is that members will be noticing commentary on this in the press. And we're just conscious that we hadn't brought a report that starts to inform members about how this may be shaping up. We brought an update report back in November about the Environment Act in totality, but we didn't go into any detail. So the purpose of this evening's report is to inform members the work that's currently been undertaken, how this may be shaping up, and hopefully that puts you in a better position for future reports that will require decisions. But this evening's report is just for information. So, Chair, as I say, we came to you in November, we talked to you about the Environment Act, and obviously Part 3 of that Act focuses on waste and resource efficiency. And the three key bits that I want to talk about this evening are, first of all, the legal requirement on us now to provide a separate weekly domestic food waste collection service by the 31st of March 2026. A sort of secondary requirement that will need to see us collect aluminium foil and tubes by March 26 and plastic film by March 27. And then thirdly, the requirement for all businesses
to have to separate out their food waste for collection by March 2025. I'll start off back to front if I may, Chair. So if I draw members' attention to page 21 of the report and paragraph 341. As I say, government has now legislated that all non-household municipal premises, so businesses, schools, hospitals, they must arrange to have their recyclable waste streams collected separately. And that includes separate collection of food waste by the 31st of March 2025. The legal position on us as a waste collection authority is that where we are asked to provide such a service, we have to. And what we can do is make a charge for that service. Now, as members will be aware, we already provide a commercial trade waste service, and we already separate out residual waste from recycling. But what we don't do is provide a commercial food waste service. And it's going to be critically important for us that we do that sooner rather than later. We certainly don't want to be waiting until March, because A, we want to maintain, as many food waste contracts that we currently have, but B, we also want to grow that service. And so we're currently working with Worcestershire County Council in respect of a disposal authority. As a two-tier area, we need to make the distinction that we as districts, we collect the waste or the recycling or the food waste, and it's county's responsibility to dispose of it or to process it. And they do that by entering into contracts with third-party facilities. So that's the distinction there. So we're working with the County Council at the moment to understand that if we, as and when we do collect commercial food waste, where will we need to take it to in terms of an anaerobic digestion facility. Now, at the front end of this process, it'll probably see us needing to take that directly to a facility, whereas at the moment we benefit from taking our waste and our recycling locally to Norton or to Hartlebury. It's going to need us to take it a little bit further in the first instance. So we'll need to sort of factor that into our pricing mechanism. But I suppose the key bit of information tonight, Chair, is that it's very likely in June we'll bring a decision report back to this committee asking for an investment decision around a commercial food waste service. That's going to likely need to see us have a truck, possibly a couple of extra members of staff as well. So there will be financial implications. But it's going to be important for us, like I say, to get ahead of that March 2025 date. So A, we can start to bid for new contracts. B, we can start to trial what a new service looks like. But C, it allows us to start to promote and market that service because we know there will be commercial competitors who will be vying for business. So I just wanted to share whether I stop there and perhaps take questions on that particular section before moving on.
Yep, that's great. Thank you, Lloyd. Councillor Cooper?
Thank you, Chair. I'm really excited about this. It's great to see Worcester City Trade Waste Service being a climate leader and getting in as an early adopter before other businesses do it so that we can be the first ones in that marketplace. So I'd like to thank officers for this report. I'm really excited about this. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Have got any other comments at this stage? Councillor Cleary?
Just a question regarding 3.41 where it says that household municipal premises have to arrange to have their for recycling or composting. What if they decide to do that themselves? So what if I don't know, say a primary school says we're going to compost everything, we're going to use it for our garden. Does that mean they still have to subscribe to the service, or can they just crack on and do it themselves? Because if they did, I wouldn't have a problem with it.
My reading of the legislation, Councillor Cleary, is if they can prove they are doing that in line with legislation, then that is okay to do. Chair, I'll move on to page 20 next, the domestic dry recycling. Only a short section, but again, just important to draw members' attention to the additional materials that we will need to collect over the next couple of years. So like I say, foil and aluminium tubes by March 26, and then plastic film by March 27. And this links into the extended producer responsibility scheme that we've discussed before. So that scheme is designed to drive down a reduction in the production and use of packaging material on the consumer market. But if we don't collect those materials by those dates, we won't receive the payments that are linked in with the EPR, with the EPR scheme. So again, this one for us at the moment, aluminium, foil and tubes, not a problem. Lots of that material is being collected across the country. There are facilities that process that. The one that we're currently monitoring, or the county are currently monitoring, is the plastic film. So there are trials nationwide at the moment about how that's collected. The tricky thing there is that those trials are taking part as part of what we call curbside sort schemes, not commingled. Now, obviously, we have a commingled service in Worcester and across Worcestershire, and we take all our commingled material to what we call a MRF. Our preference would be that we collect plastic film as part of a commingled service. But at the moment, trials aren't focusing on that. They're focusing on that material being separated out. So really, just to inform members of those key dates, we'll continue to monitor those nationwide trials. And again, we'll report back on that as and when we can. So any questions on that one, Chair?
Any questions? Go on, Councillor Cooper. Go on.
Thank you. You won't be surprised to know, as a Green Party councillor, I recycle all my soft plastics. I take them to supermarkets. So as a family of 4, we've got the smallest bin possible. the smallest size that Worcester City do. And we use a third of a bin every 2 weeks. So this will be really huge when this happens. Thank you.
Yeah. I think the impact on the size of black bins and potentially how frequently you collect them, this is really important. Did you have your hand up? No? Councillor Bissett?
Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering whether plastic film is just one thing, or whether there's lots and lots of different sorts of it. Because as a consumer, it seems to me that there's lots of different sorts. And is this going to cause, is this a source of problems? Maybe, you know, this is obviously a big issue. But if there was more consistency in the kind of plastic film that the industries use, then recycling it would be a lot easier. I'm probably just wishing for rainbows.
No, I think your point's taken, Councillor Bissett. I'm sure there is lots of material that's classed as plastic film. I think the fact that there are trials ongoing shows that this is something where we're perhaps behind the curve yet. We're not too sure what we do with it and how we process it. So I think that probably answers your question. I think for us, you know, this is why the Waste Disposal Authority at County, they're the waste strategists, so to speak. That's why they're monitoring this. So I'm probably not best placed to answer your question, but we can get some further information from County on it and provide an update to this committee via a briefing.
Yeah, great. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Chair. And then to go back to the top of the report, back to page 16. As I said a little earlier, the government has now set a clear legal requirement for councils to introduce a separate weekly collection of food waste by March 2026. There are what they call transitional arrangements for councils that are entered into long-term waste contracts. The County Council has contacted and worked with DEFRA on whether or not Worcestershire would be eligible for transitional arrangements. But the feedback is that we would likely not be. The current waste contract with across the county we're tied into January 2029. Transitional arrangements have not been applied for. And the other reason for not applying for them is that we didn't want to put at risk any funding allocations that we had. It was unclear that if we applied for transitional arrangements, would that then push all the funding allocations further up the line as well? And we felt it was important to know what we're dealing with here. There are 3 tranches of funding allocation, which I'll come on to, and we felt it was important to know what they were so we could start to plan. There's been lots of work going on behind the scenes, both collaboratively, both districts and county, to look at service options. But it's becoming increasingly clear to us that if we are going to achieve a March 2026 compliance date, that we're going to likely have to do that on our own as a standalone Worcester City service. The primary reason for that is that if we were to be part of a county-wide service, so the 6 districts as collection authorities and the County Council as disposal authority, then that would require what we're calling strategic locations or food waste transfer facilities. What that means is then that we as districts would collect the food waste. We would take it to a transfer station, and then the county would move that on to an anaerobic digester. The reason for them needing that is for resilience, basically. If we didn't have those waste transfer stations, and if the anaerobic digester that we were using, for whatever reason, went down, we couldn't use that facility, you know, we would need the resilience of being able to store our food waste somewhere. If we didn't have those sites, then that food waste would just back up. It would cause resilience issues. So that's the primary reason. And again, just to mention, you know, regarding that way of working, even if that was something we were to support at this stage, those sites have not yet been identified or acquired. There's then the sort of regulatory permissions that go with that, the construction and the commission. So colleagues at county at the moment are suggesting that if that was a route that other districts were to go down, that's unlikely to be operational until late 2027. And again, just a reminder, what government is saying is, as collection authorities, we need to be collecting this from March 2026. What that does mean, as I mentioned as part of the commercial food waste, is that if we are going to do this by March 2026, that is going to bring added cost, because that's going to mean us collecting food waste from each household, and then us having to directly take that to an anaerobic digestion facility. And the County Council are currently engaging with anaerobic digestion plants to look at options for that. But like I say, currently we benefit from the fact that we take our residual waste to Hartlebury, which is a couple of miles up the road, and we take our recycling to Norton, which is a couple of miles down the road. What this is going to mean for us likely is at the end of the day, after we've collected all our food waste, there's probably then a 50-mile round journey to get our food waste to an anaerobic digester and get the trucks back to the depot. Like I say, this is an information report, but it would have felt wrong to perhaps give members a feel for what the service may look like as we move forward. So just in short, what we're envisaging at the moment, and again, this will be a decision report for members as we move forward. Each household will have a small internal food waste caddy, and that encourages the uptake of service. And they'll have an external food waste caddy, slightly bigger, that can be kept on top of or next to your existing bins. One decision that we will need to take is whether or not we provide what we call caddy liners for the internal food caddies. And if we are going to provide them, how long do we provide them for? Are they at cost? Are they free? There's certainly evidence to suggest that provision of bin liners helps with uptake of food waste. So again, something for members to think about, and we'll bring a recommendation on that as we move forward. Obviously, not all properties are the same in Worcester, so it will be necessary to provide an alternative service for those residents who live in flats or other communal settings, and who currently dispose of their waste in larger communal bins. And as I say, what will then be needed is we will need to empty from every property into the back of newly procured food waste trucks. Just on that, there's been some modelling undertaken, again, as part of that county-wide exercise, and it's looking as though for Worcester we'll need 6 new food waste vehicles to service the core properties. And that's also going to require us, Gareth, to rationalise space at the depot so we can fit them in, park them safely for use. And again, one of the key challenges for us at the moment is the lead-in times on food waste trucks. So Gareth's worked with a number of providers. At the moment, depending on what provider you go to, lead-in times are around 6 to 18 months, and that's only going to get worse as more councils start to think about this and start to plan for implementation. The other challenge we face is around, obviously, our preference is to consider electric trucks, but the capital funding that we've been provided with by government, not to go into too much detail, doesn't cover anywhere near enough what we would need to procure an electric truck. So it's going to prove very, very difficult for us without there being a significant financial impact for us to consider electric trucks. Obviously, the technical issue as well is around that travel distance for us, particularly at the end of the day. 50-mile round journey, And again, what we're understanding is the current sort of electric truck availability would struggle perhaps with that level of journey. However, what we are continuing to do is to investigate the use of HVO, which again this committee have discussed in the past, have pointed a sort of a preference to, and Gareth and the team continue to work on that. Again, we'll bring something back to members on this one, but there are financial challenges with that will need us to consider that carefully, not least capital investment and ongoing revenue pressure as well around it being more expensive than diesel, accepting it comes with significant carbon benefits though. We've just mentioned the electric feasibility study at Warnden Depot. And the reason we've mentioned that is that obviously we're about to kickstart that process and undertake that. What we'll make sure of is that that study is based on the future need for the fleet, not the current need for the fleet. So we know food waste trucks are going to have to come online, probably 6 to 8. We'll make sure that the study takes into account the future need for the service. So paragraph 323, we set out the sort of range of risks and the complexity that's currently sitting within this project. I'll come on to capital and revenue in a moment, but the bullet points there set out some of the challenges that we are facing. So just as I draw to an end, Chair, there are 3 tranches of funding that we as a council will receive to support the introduction of food waste. They are capital transitional funding, transitional resource costs and ongoing resource costs. The first of those has been allocated to us, the capital transition funding. And as you see in 326, the total value of that is 728,000. Unfortunately, that is some way short of what we believe we need to introduce a food waste service. We believe it's in the region of £460,000 short. So there isn't enough for what we believe for trucks. DEFRA have based on their numbers, have included for 4 trucks, we need 6. And they've also underestimated the total number of households in the city. There's an appeal process, we've started that, and we'll make sure we provide all the information to ensure that DEFRA are understanding of exactly what we need. We don't know what the resource transition funding is yet. Paragraph 330 covers what that will include, and the same for the ongoing resource and revenue funding, 331. We don't know what that is yet either. And again, that just adds to the complication and complexity of the decision. Lastly, we've just pointed out there that piece of work across the county in terms of a single county-wide service. I've talked you through some of the challenges of being part of that, certainly the date of when we would be able to introduce it. But again, it would be disingenuous not to say that that may deliver a level of savings in the region of £60,000 a year. But even if we did go early and complied with the 2026 date, that doesn't stop us being part of a county-wide service further on. So, it means that any potential saving from a county-wide service isn't lost. So where we are, Chair, still lots of work to do. And because of, we're a small council, we're a team focused on collection. We need to look at bringing in some specialist resource to support us with this, because what we need to bring back to you in November at the latest is a costed action plan for you to consider. And the decision at that stage will be whether or not we want to go for March 26 or as nearest to it as possible or not. Without that additional support, we're not going to be able to do that for you. So we will look to bring that in the next couple of weeks, so we can get back to you in November with a decision report. So I shall stop rambling there, Chair, and open it to.
Yeah, that's a huge amount of information. Sorry.
Thank you. I had 3 points, and I'm going to actually do them in reverse order. I haven't thought about it. First, I wanted to say thank you for this report. I think it is really useful to have this level of comprehensive report, giving us the detail of what to expect and the things that are happening. It's much better. I think we talked about the power of teamwork, and I think this is a really good example of the teamwork in this council, that you don't just wait till November and say these are the choices. You're actually saying to us this is the thought process we're going through and the logic of why. And actually, I think it's a very convincing argument of logic of why. And I've had the advantage, I've read the report in advance. even before the papers got released. So yeah, I think it's a really good idea. I'm totally supportive of going forward if we can, once that more detailed work it has been done. The principle I'm supportive of. I had one question that leads to that. I can see why we'd not want to wait for the county, but I like the fact we haven't ruled out the opportunity if that presents itself at a future date. Do we know what the other district councils' views are and where they're at with this?
I'm not sure it would be totally fair to talk about each district's position. Well, I'm not sure they've put anything into the public domain, Councillor Cookson. So I think what I can say is that there's a range of views across the county, and the cross-county work is ongoing. They are reported into leadership group fairly frequently. So the council leaders across the county are receiving that information, but there's no collective decision yet on whether there's a county-wide system or whether districts are going alone. What I can say is we've probably been the most open in terms of we are going to take to our members an option that puts in front of them March 26 or as nearest to it or something else.
I guess, accepting that you can't say, are there any other areas that you know of that are considering this going ahead as early as we are? And you don't. I'm not expecting names of areas.
Not that I'm aware of.
That's fine. Thank you. It's great that we're leading the way. Again.
Councillor Cleary.
Thanks, Chair. It's a question about these little bags to go in the caddy bins. I would imagine that is not a decision that we should think about making. It should be imperative, because the presence of them is the reason why some people can't be bothered and just put stuff in the big bin, because they've got to keep washing out this little caddy. So I'm just wondering, have we got any indication of what the cost is of providing these little bags? And if so, is that a decision that the Environment Committee make, or is this done? Yeah.
Councillor Crewe, I won't give you a price because I'll probably get it wrong, but again, it's something we can share as part of a follow-up note to committee. I think our position as officers, we would like to do everything we possibly can to encourage uptake. As I said, as part of my presentation, there's certainly evidence to suggest that provision of liners definitely does that. I suppose there is a financial decision for the council. They do come at a cost. And once you provide them, it does set a bit of a precedent. And, do we continue with it? So what we will do as part of the November report, we will set that out, and we'll set those options out for members to consider.
My point is that if we're spending 720 grand on this, I don't know. I mean, if these bins are costing 90,000, it ain't going to cost another 90 grand to provide the bags. So if we're all in for 720,000 pound, if it's going to cost another 5 grand to provide the bags, I think that should go through that discussion, to be honest with you.
Yeah, Councillor Cleary, building on that, I'm very aware that the capital funding was 728, and we said that's not enough. And we've got 2 stages of funding coming. And I don't really want us to be in the position where we think that's not enough either, and that's not enough either. And, we're looking at the second thing where it's communications and marketing, which are obviously, that is also really important that we get this right. And, we have to cut corners on that. I think we're in trouble. So thank you for going back and saying, this wasn't enough, and interrogating the money, because I think that's really important for every stage. It is a bit disappointing that the government haven't provided enough money for electric trucks. I have to say, it's if they'd given us 300,000 and said, this is on the proviso that we will have electric trucks, that would have actually helped us a lot, wouldn't it? But never mind. Right, Councillor Cooper.
Thank you, Chair. 2 things. I really welcome the HVO. If we can't get electric vehicles and that 90% reduction in emissions, especially when we're in air quality management zone. So thank you very much. I really appreciate that. Something that I would like to see, and I recognise it's a Worcestershire County Council function, is more subsidised compost bins for hot compost. Hot composting bins, for those who don't know, recycle cooked food. They are not subsidised. They're between £95 and £225, which is out of the reach of lots of our residents. But by subsidising that, that would be a really good investment for people with gardens, that then we wouldn't need to collect their food because perhaps they're doing it themselves. So I'd like to see that run in parallel. And I wonder if the City Council, because although we can't affect that because it's a county council function, I'm wondering if we could do a lot in our comms about composting and the sorts of food waste that could be composted. Thank you.
Yeah, I think we'll certainly take that up with the county council and see if we can do something jointly around that.
There is actually a council that's using hot composting bins for their outlying, it's a very big county, for their outlying areas because it's cheaper to provide the bins for free than to get the vehicles there. And apparently it is working. So we're a more compact place then, aren't we? Yeah. Councillor Cross.
Thank you. Just picking up on the last thing that you mentioned there about hot composting bins. Last summer, with family, we stayed at an off-grid campsite, actually in quite an urban setting, which is sadly outside of Worcestershire, I believe, just. But they worked really well, and it was quite surprising. So it actually was viable for fairly significant sized campsite, and so that's certainly worth exploring, and I'm happy to provide more details. My question that I had before you spoke just then was asking about biomethane potential. So yes, HVO, but if we are to have digesters producing biomethane, where the trucks, I gather, I note things from the Society of Motor, the SMMT, so a trade body for automotive, talking about fleets using biomethane to cut their emissions. So not just HVO, but whether biomethane is being explored as an alternative to diesel as well, or if that could be, please. Thank you.
Again, I'm not aware that we are looking at that at the moment, Chair, but again, that's something we can pick up as part of the county-wide working group and see whether there are any opportunities, potentially that could be offered through that if we're engaging with an anaerobic digestion plant and that's being produced.
I've got a question actually. You know, in 3.2, you're talking about the feasibility study being complete by July 2024, but the feasibility study will set out what we need, but we don't actually have the funding to put that in place yet, do we? So will officers be looking out for further funding like we have for the EV car charging in our car parks? You know, the opportunities to get more funding to get those in place, because otherwise, where will we get the money for that? Thank you.
Absolutely, Chair. I think it's right and proper that we bring members the outcome of the work and the recommendations that will be provided as part of the report. And as part of that, if there are funding opportunities that exist at the time, we'll bring those to members' attention.
So any other comments or questions? No. So we've got a recommendation, haven't we? It's five things. Has everybody read it? That the committee notes the government legislated simpler recycling requirements. We note that we've had the allocation of funding, capital funding, with the food waste collection by March 2026. I think that's absolutely key. And then number 3 is to note the intention to develop a costed action and delivery plan for the introduction of weekly domestic food waste by March 2026. Number 4 is that we note that this will be presented by this committee in October for consideration. If we're all there, that'd be great, wouldn't it? Because we won't have to repeat yourself. And number 5, note a separate report to be presented to the committee setting out a business case for the introduction of commercial food waste service by March 2025. Okay. Are we all happy for that to go through? No amendments? Yeah. Okay, thank you. Do we have any other business? I don't believe we have. No. I'll draw the meeting to a close then, and thank you very much. Thank you, everybody.